It's a very, very famous coat of arms.
Okay.
This was designed and given to... Hey everybody, it's Eric Pappenfuss. It's Friday, so it must be a buy day. On Valentine's Day, we are going to talk about armorial bindings. I found an amazing armorial binding just recently with a terrific story. It's here in the box. I think it's appropriate for Valentine's Day, and we're going to get to it in just a minute. But I wanted to talk just a little bit more generally about the publishing industry, too, to talk about the most common form of armorial binding that we get here at the Collectibles Room, and that is the prize binding, or the prize book, which was very common in Victorian and Edwardian London from about, the 19th century into the 20th century, where schools would give awards to their students for, best in class or the highest scores in math, and they would emblazon upon these bindings the coat of arms of the school. And this harkened back to the older tradition of armorial bindings, which go all the way back to the Middle Ages, in which individual owners would put their, heraldic marks on their books. We've got one of those to show you, but the most common are these school prize bindings. And they're really beautiful, Amanda. We've got about 40 or 50 here. And the neat thing about it is they span all the different subjects that we have here in the Collectibles building, because it would depend on what the student was winning the prize for. So I brought you some. I'll show you what we're talking about. So when we're talking about an armorial binding, we're talking about a binding that has the coat of arms stamped onto the front of the book, sometimes onto the back of the book. And what's interesting is that publishers in the Victorian period basically got in on this and encouraged schools to give these out as prizes, because they realized they could take a relatively simple book on relatively simple paper and put a fancy expensive binding on it and sell twice as much, and then you could just, boom, stamp the coat of arms. The armorial bindings also almost always have the prize slip in the front, which is sort of a book plate. And today, there's still schools that give books as prizes. Did you ever win a prize in school?
I don't know.
Well, I know that Harrisburg Academy does it here, but usually the teachers, they'll put a book plate in.
Yeah, I think I do have one or two.
Yeah, well, we no longer hand bind things, but it's a similar concept, right? But anyhow, this is the Science Prize for 1906, right? So very nice and Edwardian. It's here from this interesting school that was in Canterbury. That's all interesting. So what do you think the book was?
Science related?
Guess. Yeah, it's science related, and it's actually a really pretty book. It's called Half Hours in Woods and Wilds, Adventures in Sport and Travel. You could see this appealing to a young reader, right? It's extensively illustrated, but I guess my point is it's a very simple book, but you put it in the prize binding, usually marble, or you gilt the edges, and suddenly you have just a beautiful book. And it's meant to be 18th century style, but it's really an early 20th century book. Got it?
Yeah.
Okay, well, here's another example. This is from King's College in London. This one's awesome, right? This pulls out all the stops. And let's look at what it was a prize for. It was presented at King's College London to this guy, Edward Stewart. This is 1858, so a little bit early, very Victorian. And it is for general proficiency. So he was basically the head boy, okay? So if you were the head boy at that time, do you know whose works you would get? You'd probably get Shakespeare, Dickens, or what he actually got, which is Scott, which is really awesome. So this is the poetical works of Sir Walter Scott, published in Edinburgh. Beautiful, beautiful book, complete in one volume, with many, many engravings. And that would be the prize. But this one they did the gilt edging. They did all the beautiful aspects of the binding. Yeah. It's called a prize binding or a prize book. Okay. The most obscure one that we have, Amanda, is this one. Now, can you see the coat of arms on this armorial binding? This is from a school in Wales. Can you see what type of school it was? I'm going to flip it open so you can see. It is the South Wales and Monmouthshire School of Mines.
Wow.
Would you like to learn how to be a miner? And this is for the first year culinary manager's course, which is to learn how to be a miner.
Oh my goodness.
So what better book to learn how to be a miner than a copy of Lyle on geology, which I think is really cool. The Student's Lyle. So 1911, book was published. This was given out as a prize in 1915, so relatively recent. So Murray, the publisher of this, would have an expensive line in prize bindings, which the schools could then buy and then stamp. But look at that. Again, very 18th century with the raised bands. Now, this goes on and on. I'll show you just a couple more. Most common prize to win was Latin, because who wouldn't want to win Latin? Look at these beautiful books. These are both prize bindings given out by schools for the head boy in Latin. Here, if you this is 1850 or so. If you win the Latin, you're going to get a classic poet. No, it's actually in English. And then just to show you that the tradition of prize bindings goes back even prior to Queen Victoria.
Wow.
Prior to it, this is a very early 18th century actual prize binding. And that is the coat of arms of Amsterdam. And this is a Dutch book. It's bound in vellum, which is very beautiful. And instead of a book plate, it actually has this presentation slip showing that the student won it as a prize. This wonderful Dutch student won it as a prize, and it's a classic, a Warfield classic published in Amsterdam, which is really, really cool. So that is the most common type. The other interesting thing about these prize bindings are they all range in price from like $75 to $150. They're not particularly valuable. They're pretty common. They're easy to collect. There are some great collections of prize bindings, but it might be an interesting avenue for collecting, especially if you're interested in beautiful bindings.
Because I bet people took good care of them.
People took good care. They were often really the highest quality version of the book you could get. So prize bindings.
All right.
Armorial bindings, though, let's go back into the 18th century, all the way down to the Middle Ages. And I found one, Amanda, which has a great story. This is what I promised you for Friday.
We're finally here.
And we're here. And it is, it's the same thing. You're going to look at this and you're going to think to yourself, well, that is pretty much what those are, except this is the real deal, right? So this is made in the 20th century to look like this.
Okay.
Do you think they did a good job?
Yeah,
not bad.
The form.
You can tell what the real binding is, and then
But this is the inspiration.
Yeah, and one of the amazing things about Google today is that you can take a coat of arms like that, which I did, and you can run it through. Now this one's stamped on both. The back is even better, so you can get it really close on that coat. It's a very, very famous coat of arms.
Okay.
This was designed and given to a person who had it on all of her books at the age, and she was the most important patron of the arts of the 18th century in France. It is Madame de Pompadour's book, who was the chief mistress to Louis XV, and is basically responsible for everything you think French in the 18th century. That's Madame de Pompadour.
I need to touch this.
You may touch it. She had 3,500 books in her collection. She was very well read. What's particularly interesting about this book is the contents, which we'll get to in a minute. But you can ask me, no, wait a minute, Eric, come on. That's not really Madame de Pompadour. How can you prove that? Couldn't somebody else have just stamped that on there to counterfeit it, to make it look collectible? Well, I would say that's what I thought first. But you know what else Google can do? Google can find you the catalog of the library of Madame de Pompadour. Look at this, which was published right after her death also in the 18th century. It's all of her books, all 3,500 books. And if you look through it, you can find this particular book. And here it is. It was not valued nearly as highly as some of the other books in the library that had fancier bindings. But here it is, Letters and Negotiations. Monsieur Huy, who is the ambassador, who was the Dutch ambassador to the court of France. And then this is published in 1743. So there it is. It's the book. It's duodecimo. It is this book. And it is definitely the book from her library. Now, what makes it interesting is you can occasionally find books from Madame Pompadour's library at auction. There were 3,500 of them. They were scattered into the wind. They're all over. But this one I think is interesting. Oh, by the way, French binding of the 18th century, very standard to have flowers on the spine, raised bands, nice decorated spines, and then beautiful leather boards. Then oftentimes you'll have the marbleized paper on the inside, and then here is a copy of the book. Now, Madame de Pompadour meets Louis in 1744.
Okay.
And what is scandalous about her is not that she's a mistress, it's that she was a commoner and did not have a title. And there was no way she was going to be accepted at court as the mistress to Louis XV without a title. So Louis gave her this coat of arms, the Pompadour coat of arms, in 1745. And what makes this book interesting is that it's 2-in-1. It is it is a book published in the year that she met Louis. So this could be really one of the earliest books that would have been in her library. It's also a simple a simple stamp on it, and the topic of the book is great. Here is an English translation of what that topic is, because it was also published in London. And what you can see is it is a book about the court itself, by the Dutch ambassador, along with a long passage on the character of the king. Can you imagine a better book for the mistress to be reading and studying? You can learn all the people in the court in 1745. You can learn what the king likes. And the interesting thing about the author is he was considered way too friendly with Louis. So he succeeded in winning Louis's trust, and was eventually dismissed and went back in disgrace to Holland. But Louis gave him medals and all sorts of prizes. So it's the perfect book for Madame de Pompadour to have had and to have read. Now, that is a pretty cool thing to just find in a pile of other books. Cool. It's very, very interesting. In popular culture, though, Amanda, today, my children know Madame de Pompadour and others from the hit British TV series Doctor Who.
I knew that was what it was going to be.
Yes, exactly. And you may know that I'm a Doctor Who fan. And one of my favorite stories from the David Tennant years is The Girl in the Fireplace, which was written by Stephen Moffat, the great Stephen Moffat, and is about David Tennant's true love, which he has for Madame de Pompadour. Shall we see a little clip of that love?
You are in my memories. You walk among them.
If there's anything you don't want me to see, just imagine a door and close it. I won't look. Oh, actually, there's a door just there. You might want to... Oh, actually several.
How can you bear it?
How did you do that?
A door once opened may be stepped through in either direction. Oh, Doctor. My lonely doctor. Dance with me.
I can't.
Dance with me.
This is the night you dance with the king.
Then first I shall make him jealous.
I can't.
Doctor. Doctor Who?
Sadly, in the story, David Tennant, while falling in love with Madame de Pompadour, is trapped behind this fireplace and the time vortex and cannot make it back to her, and doesn't make it back to her, sadly, until after her death, Amanda. And it is true that Madame de Pompadour dies relatively young, but she has had incredible influence on the king up to that time. Let's see one more clip. Here is the doctor receiving word of Madame de Pompadour's death.
There she goes, leaving Versailles for the last time, too young. Illness took her in the end. She always did work too hard. What does she say? Of course. Quite right.
Reason tells me that you and I are unlikely to meet again. But I think I shall not listen to reason. I have seen the world inside your head and know that all things are possible. Hurry though, my love. My days grow shorter now and I am so very weak. Godspeed, my lonely angel.
Well, now that you've had your Valentine's Day love story, was Madame de Pompadour Doctor Who's true love? I think so. And by the way, just one comment about value. So a book like this, without the association to Madame de Pompadour, is probably worth $200, $250. With the association to Madame de Pompadour, priceless. I don't know. I have no idea. 10 times that, potentially. Wow. Doesn't have her manuscript notations in it. There's no proof that she actually read it, but she had a very specific library and most likely did read the book. And so
you can make the case.
I think you can make the case for sure. Funny book, shall we?
Yeah.
Are you in the mood for Valentine's Day? Doing anything special?
Just hanging out.
Yeah, we're just hanging out. Well, for all those who maybe, what can I say?
No preamble needed.
If you'd like, we have this great book that just came in. It's Hate Poems for Ex-Lovers. Now, there's plenty of books on love poems. I think I've read some on previous Valentine's Day and Bi Day in the past. We've got Elizabeth Barrett Browning. We've got all the great love poets behind me. But if you want to try some hate poems, you might want to pick up this book at the Scholar. It's filled with such great little fantastic things. Words of wisdom like, if you want something to last, you have to deal in antiquities. Yeah, that's a good phrase. Or don't hate yourself, you're not worth it. These are things that you can provide to others for a little anti-Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this week's Buy Day. Happy Valentine's Day. I'll see you next Friday and every Friday at noon for more adventures in the world of books.